You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Hi, everyone there. My name is Mate Jukic. I'm the president of the Croatian Cricket Federation, an associate member of the ICC, and you're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. And on the podcast, we have started a new series on the podcast looking at associate nations within cricket and how they are developing the game in their country. Many of us cricket fans know so much about the established cricketing countries and not enough on the associate nations who play cricket. So it would be nice to learn more about those associate countries, and via the podcast, people can learn more as well. For today's Associate Cricket Series episode, we are discussing all things Croatia cricket. Joining me to discuss and talk all things Croatia cricket is the president of the Croatian Cricket Federation, Mate Jukic. Mate, welcome.
Hi there, Jack. Thank you very much for your invitation and for having the opportunity to be a guest on your Dibbly Dobbly podcast.
Well, Mate, it's a pleasure, and it's always great to have many different people on from associate countries in this series, and I found it quite rewarding and quite an education as well about associate cricket and learning more about how these countries go about developing the game in these certain countries. And many of our watchers and listeners as well of the podcast have certainly felt that as well. They've learned more and they've appreciated what goes into running associate cricket more broadly, because it does take an army and it does take a whole heap of manpower to try and develop and get the game across in certain associate countries. So yes, it's my pleasure, Mate, to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to it in terms of learning more about Croatia cricket and the work you're doing there as an organisation. And I think people as well watching this episode today will feel the same. So definitely. A lot of learnings, and a lot of people can definitely take something out of this episode today, which is the point of this episode in this associate cricket series. It's all about learning and about understanding what these associate nations do. But before we do that, Mate, as I do with all my guests that I've interviewed on the podcast, I'd like to take them back to when they first got into cricket. It's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they started to get into cricket. So, Mate, let's go back to the very beginning growing up. What were your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket? And who were some of the cricketing idols that you looked up to growing up?
Thanks, Jack. As a young kid, about maybe 4 or 5, I was born in Sydney, in Australia. I was quite lucky to have a big backyard. And obviously, when you have a big backyard, you've got a lot of space to play backyard cricket. And a lot of us Australians and, people around the world, when you've got a big backyard cricket, usually the 4 is when you hit the ball over the fence and a 6 is when you hit the ball over the house. So my first fond memories of cricket was about 4 or 5, playing backyard cricket. After that, obviously, through primary school, cricket was a massive sport in all primary schools. Cricket on TV wasn't as much as shown. But then probably late 70s, early 80s, I don't know if you remember, it was, I think, the Benson and Hedges World Series back, years ago. That was the first kind of time when I saw cricket on TV as a 5 or 6-year-old through, primary schools, school cricket, but definitely on TV. And obviously, as a young kid playing backyard cricket, I wanted to then play cricket, in the parks, on the cricket fields, on the cricket grounds, and especially watch a game of cricket. Back then, it was the test matches and the 50-over one-day internationals. And my first time that I went to watch a game I was about 6. I asked my dad if he can take me to a cricket match. That was at the local cricket grounds where I used to live. That was my kind of first experience watching live cricket. It was actually watching juniors play and seniors. After that, having the opportunity to watch cricket on a more broader scale, more professionally, was when my dad took me to the SCG in Sydney. and I think it was Australia playing versus the West Indies. It was one day international. My heroes back then, obviously, as every young cricketer had, they varied from bowlers to batters. But my favourite cricketers were always Dean Jones, Steve Waugh, and Mark Waugh, especially Dean Jones and Steve Waugh. Alan Border as a captain was always phenomenal. He was the way he led the team. But as a memory, Steve Waugh and Dean Jones were very excited, very exciting batsmen, very exciting players. But even watching the West Indians play, from Viv Richards, to the bowlers of Curtly Ambrose, Malcolm Marshall. As a young kid back then, they all had whites. There were no coloured outfits back then. And that were my first kind of fond memories of watching cricket more broadly, obviously at a stadium, more professionally, watching professionals play, even though there were a lot more amateurs back then. But yeah, and I still took, I'm in my mid-40s, I still remember those fond memories. Playing backyard cricket, school cricket, primary school cricket, then at the local grounds, and then the pinnacle was just going to the SCG, the Sydney Cricket Grounds, and watching a one-day international in between Australia and West Indies, and watching my favourite players play, batsmen Steve Waugh and Dean Jones.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dean Jones, Curtly Ambrose against the West Indies asked Curtly to remove his sweatbands because he.
That's correct.
Yes. Curtly turned up the pace after that. And the rest of the team was like, what are you doing, Dean? Yeah. You've just fired him up.
yes. And then Dean got out a few balls after that also. But that's what you love the game about, just the atmosphere, the competitiveness in between the players. We say the bandering or the bit of sledging back then when it happens. But yeah, that was one of the highlights of that series, definitely.
Yes. He was a great player, Dean Jones. Obviously, sadly missed.
Sadly passed away.
Yeah. His 200 in the Tide Test in 1986 in Madras will always be remembered. Battling through dehydration and throwing up on the pitch, and Alan Border saying, "Well, we'll get a Queenslander out here," and because he wanted to retire. Dino didn't like that, so he thought, well, I better soldier on, and and he did, and he played one of the best innings that you'll ever see by an Australian batter in India.
Yeah,
there's oppressive conditions in Chennai back in 1986, and what a Test match it was! It was the Tide Test, obviously the second one ever, following the first one between Australia and the West Indies in 1960-61, which was in Brisbane at the Gabba. So, how would you describe yourself as a player, Matty? If you had to describe yourself as a cricketer?
It's a bit hard. I'm pretty much an all-rounder. When I was younger, I was more of a batsman than a bowler. But now these days, as you get older, you're more of a bowler than a batsman. In between, I used to be more of fast, medium pace, but these days I'm more of a medium pace. I like to see myself as an all-rounder, and as I said, as a primary school player to high school, I was lucky enough to go to a sporting primary school and sporting high school where cricket was probably, with the rugby league in Sydney, the number one sport. We had, so many training sessions on a weekly basis, games, school cricket, weekend crickets, and that was a massive part of my life, definitely. And all that, was just the pathway to, playing cricket, obviously, more broadly in Sydney for the local team until I was probably 17, 18. Obviously, other life things happen, education, school, work-wise, so then you get a bit less time to play cricket and a game you love. But then I had a kind of a second opportunity to play more international cricket, more European cricket when I arrived in Croatia. So my kind of life of cricket would be in two stages, throughout primary school and high school, and after high school, and then a second stage arriving and permanently living in Croatia would be my second stage, where seeing cricket develop in Europe at that early stage, it was quite hard. Just hard finding cricket equipments and cricket balls and pads, and so we had to kind of bring our kits all the way from Australia to Europe back then. And obviously, playing at any green field, any concrete field that you can, think of, or finding a proper pitch, it was quite hard. Obviously, finding a turf pitch in Europe back then was very hard to find. So we had to kind of be satisfied with artificial cricket pitches. And that's why kind of these days you'll see a lot of artificial cricket pitches in Europe.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Europe just probably gave me a second kind of, approach to cricket, traveling around European nations, from Germany, Wales, Guernsey and Jersey to Spain, Italy and France, and, around the Central European countries. That's what cricket really did for me, not only for me, but for a lot of my friends who came from overseas, who came from Australia to live in Croatia, and other locals also. So as I said, till today, I still see myself as an all-rounder. And yeah, I just try to help the local team, the federation, on a playing aspect as much as I can. Try to stretch as much as I can before the game and after the game, and just try to keep my eye on the ball and try not to bowl as many wides, obviously, these days.
That's right. Yeah, try and get it on the cut stuff, which is the important thing for bowler. But yeah, you have played for Croatia, obviously, in the formative years before they were an associate member. Because what people need to realise, for those who are coming into the game for the first time, is that associate cricket was split into two halves. Really, you had affiliate members and associate members. Whereas now it's just all one. Now it's just associate members. Now it's the one member. But you were playing in those formative years for Croatia. That must have been a proud moment for you to represent your country and where you came from. And that it must have been a proud moment for you.
It definitely was. When I first came to Croatia and having heard that there is cricket in Croatia, that was just mind-boggling. I just could not believe that. Croatia, obviously, in cricket, it's like when you hear about the Jamaican bobsleigh team in bobsleigh and something similar to that. The cricket in Croatia, believe it or not, as I mentioned before, was first mentioned back 200 years ago, more than 200 years ago. It was first mentioned and played on the island of Vis, a beautiful island on the coast of Croatia. It actually was played during the Napoleon Wars. Back then, a certain General William Host, having his ship and his fleet of sailors, or as we can say, just his departments of soldiers. Back then, when the war was happening, he had orders to travel to the Adriatic coast, and obviously, seeing many different islands there, they decided to take anchor in a certain bay in Vis on one of the islands. And then obviously when you take anchor, you would just go to the mainlands and see what is happening there. Obviously there wasn't much life back then on Vis, but with his ship and his fleet, and he had so many he had quite a bit of sailors on board. They found a nice flat piece of lands, and they decided while the war was happening, the war went on for 4 to 5 years, that they would play just cricket, hit the ball around with a cricket back then. And they'd done that for a couple of years. And that's why when I mentioned that cricket has its first, mentions and was first established back 200 years ago, many people would not believe that, especially in Croatia. But that's actually what happens. So we're kind of proud of that. And that's a big part of our cricket was, that cricket was first played in Croatia on the island of Vis back more than 200 years ago. Specifically, I think back in 1809. That's when it was first played. And obviously, back then, as history developed, it was also first played in our capital city, Zagreb, back in the early 20th century, where a group of students decided to, find a certain wooden bats and ball and play cricket in their school grounds. So that was pretty much the first mentions of cricket, back 200 years ago and in the early 20th century. Obviously, cricket has developed from then on, all the way to modern era, contemporary era. And our first, when our federation was established, it was first established in the early 2000s by a group of expats. who came from Australia, from Melbourne and from Sydney, and decided just to play the game that they love from Australia, and decided to form a federation. Back then, knowingly that, you know, having a team or having a federation, it was quite hard. The financial aspect of the story there wasn't as big. They just loved it because they were enthusiasts, loved the game of cricket, wanted to play cricket at any possible ground or any kind of possible concrete fields. And I think back then they never really realised that how big cricket can become in Croatia. So obviously from the early 2000s, from forming one team, then to two teams and three teams, and so on, they decided, yeah, let's make a federation, cricket federation. After that, the plans became more serious, and we put in a application for submission to become an affiliate member of the ICC. So that all happened in the early 2000s, 2001, 2, 3, and 4. And from then on, obviously, when we received the positive news that Croatia did become an affiliate member and was recognised, and they accepted us into the ICC family, that's when all things started to happen more seriously. Just playing cricket domestically, forming men's senior teams and women's senior teams, our junior programs, and then obviously internationally competing for the Croatian national team. So when I received my first invite to play for the Croatian national team, it was a very proud moment for myself. I thought, you know, playing for a certain national team, regardless on how good you are as a player, it's always a special moment. To put on that shirt with the Croatian Cricket Federation logo, to wear the stripes. So the checkers we had back then, obviously, was a proud moment for us, and definitely for me, but for the whole team. Back then, cricket was a 50 over formats. There was a lot more overs to be played, a lot more games to be played. It really kind of showed us that cricket, regardless of where you are, you can play cricket. And as a proud Croatian, as I have always been, I just, I took up that opportunity to play for a national team, and to travel Europe, to meet new people, and to develop the game in Croatia. So I played about 7 or 8 international games for Croatia. So, but just to watching the other players who are better than me, obviously, bowler and batter, just to watch them develop and to watch the team develop. We started at a young kind of Division 4 team, Division 5, and then worked all the way up to a Division 2 team. Beating the likes of Spain, Belgium, Isle of Man, Luxembourg, to Romania and Bulgaria. So we had, and Cyprus. So we had a lot of competition there. And just to see that progress from a Division 4 nation to a Division 2 back then, that was really marvelous to see, and I was really proud, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a great moment when you represent any country, really, or any level of cricket, your team or country, if you're lucky to do that. So I can imagine it was a proud moment, definitely is. And that's often the case for a lot of players in associate cricket, who go over to these associate countries and play, and because their family connections obviously in those countries, and want to help out in the best way they can. So it's fantastic. It's fantastic that we're seeing that across the associate world when it comes to that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely. You should be proud of that, definitely. In terms of your current post, you're the president at the moment. You've been there since 2021 when you took up your presidency. Tell us, how did that come about in terms of you wanting to be the president, and what made you want to put your hand up for this greater responsibility?
Look, I throughout the early 2000s, I was always involved with Croatian cricket, either as a executive committee member, either as a club president. In different ways, I was always involved, but never as a president. There were many presidents before me. I always helped as much as I can, logistically, financially, just in other ways, trying to get promotion, trying to get funding, government funding, and so on, so on. So I was always involved in some kind of way with Croatian cricket when I first arrived to Croatia, but never in a presidency role. Back in 2018-19, the Croatian Cricket Federation had a few issues. We were just not fulfilling the ICC Euro criteria enough. Not only us, a lot of associate countries had problems in fulfilling the criteria. We kind of fell away probably from 2012-13 to about 2018-19, where the people that were presidents and who were involved with Croatian cricket retired. They did not have the enthusiasm anymore. They had the interest, but just did not have the time. And as I said, they had families. All this due to the fact that cricket in Croatia is a volunteer work. We don't get paid for it. And it just, it took a toll on a lot of the leadership team there, just time-wise and work-wise. So, as a younger person, I was probably in my, late 30s, early 40s. I put my hand up to take over the presidency of the Croatian Cricket Federation. I thought with my leadership team, I had about 7 or 8 people who I did approach and asked if they would be involved in a leadership team in the federation and if they would support my role and just help and support wherever they can. And I received all positive news from them. And I just put my hand up and said, look, I have many wonderful ideas. I feel that I can contribute to the Croatian Cricket Federation, more as the evolution of cricket. I can say, like, for example, when T20 started happening and just other formats, a lot more people were involved, a lot of live streaming, a lot of, promotion in European crickets. Just there was a lot more focus on associate cricket in Europe. And I had, ideas, and I just, had the support of my team to implement those ideas locally and nationally in Croatia. And I put my hand up, and from then on, from early 2021, during the Corona years, we remember how hard it was, and to get a game played, and just to kind of have a group match, it was very hard. So just to go through that bit of turmoil as a federation, like many other European federations, just have to get through that period and just proceed along. And day by day, we had the great support of people and followers, enthusiasts, we've from then on pretty much managed to get Croatian cricket where it is today. There's a lot more work to be done on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly, yearly basis, but I feel that the direction we are going towards, it's a bright future. Just from being associate member of the ICC, a member of the Croatian Olympic Committee, having 4 to 5 cricket centres in Croatia, developing senior men's cricket, women's cricket, junior cricket, school cricket in general. You can see the change has been happening, and just more promotional wise, just to getting the name of cricket more broader in Croatia, because as a non-traditional sport in Croatia, we always try to do our best and just make sure that the people out there, do hear about cricket, and in any kind of aspect, just through news articles, just through podcasts like this, interviews, school cricket, and so on. So that's kind of our main goal, is to always try to get cricket, out there amongst the Croatians in Croatia, so they can see what cricket is all about, and just try to explain to them the rules of cricket, the game, how it's played, and just saying, look, it's an easy game to play, not expensive, anyone can play it, from a kid that's 3 or 4, using his first bat, to a retiree who's age 75. So that's the kind of strategy we go by, definitely.
Absolutely, and that's what you set out to do, really, just try and make the game better and try and promote the good game of cricket in Croatia. That's for sure. You're definitely doing that, and the team as well. And we'll talk about that more later when we get into chat, Mate, about the growth and development side of it and what you're doing there in terms of the programs and all that stuff. And also, thank you for sharing your cricket journey in terms of your introduction, your playing experience. I always find it quite fascinating listening to people's introductions to the game because everyone's different. I suppose that's the game of cricket in general, really. Everyone's different. Everyone does it differently. We're not all the same in terms of playing the game or how we got into the game itself. So it's always interesting listening to people's memories and looking back and that when they got into the game. So thank you for sharing that with us, Mate, on your experience on the game of cricket. Mate, I thought to start this interview on Croatia cricket. Let's talk about the history of cricket in Croatia. Now, you gave us a little bit of a preview before about the history of it, but you can learn a lot about cricket from its history. And the history of Croatia, cricket in Croatia, I should say, is quite interesting. So, as I said, you gave us a little bit of a preview of the history earlier when you mentioned that. But, Mate, give us a brief overview on the history of cricket in Croatia from, all aspects of the game and how they all pretty much started and continue to be a presence in Croatia.
Well, as I mentioned before, cricket, a lot of people would not believe that, and we always get surprised faces and astonished faces when you tell someone, look, cricket was first played more than 200 years ago in Croatia. And they just look at you and they go, that's not possible. Well, it is possible. A lot of people don't know this, and we kind of like to brag about this. As Croatia, as a tourist country, we like to tell especially our English tourists, Australian tourists and New Zealand tourists, that cricket was first played on the island of Vis in 1809. It was played by a certain General William Host during the Napoleon Wars. The war went on for about 4 to 5 years. So obviously, with every war, the army, the soldiers had a lot of time to do a lot of things apart from, having a war and fighting other countries. So they, coming from England, William Host, he anchored off a certain bay on the island of Vis, and obviously just to kind of entertain the crew and just to kind of relax them and, have other activities outside of war activities, he decided, look, we can see a clear path, we can see a clear field of green, it's flats. How about we go and try and play some cricket here? And that's what they done. So actually that fields where they first played cricket, that's pretty much very near to where the current Sir William Host Cricket Club fields is played at, also on Vis. So the ground is called Plisko Polje. So dating from William Host, there is a current team that was established in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that team is called Sir William Host Cricket Club Vis. And that ground where William Host played with his crew is pretty much, as I mentioned, quite close to the current ground where the current cricket is now played on the island of Vis. The island of Vis, that was our first team. The first, as I can say, the first mention of crickets. They have a lot of touring teams come there on a yearly basis. So yeah, we're quite happy about that and quite proud. So obviously, back then, many years passed by, and then to the capital city of Zagreb, where it also mentions the first mentions of cricket when it was played was in the beginning of the 20th century. He was played at a sports faculty. Yet again, just a few students decided to play a bit of. It wasn't called cricket back then, but it was just a wooden bats and a few balls. And they decided, well, let's go and play a game similar to cricket, where you just hit the ball and you run between 2 sticks, and we have boundaries and so on. So that was the second mention of cricket in Zagreb in the early 20th century. So cricket was always kind of mentioned in the books and historically, as facts, but never actually played officially. Never actually played in an organizational way. And then, obviously, Croatia going through its own war back in the early 90s, to 1994, 95. After that's becoming an independent democratic country, a lot of expats from around the world, especially Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and in other countries where cricket is a traditional sport, decided to come back to play, to live in Croatia. And then obviously coming back to live in Croatia, bringing back the passions they had as kids, through sports and so on. And yeah, they just came back there and decided, well, what can we play here that we love so much, that we played so much as a kid? What kind of sport? And that number one sport was cricket. And yeah, so it's been a long kind of path. But yeah, as I mentioned before, we are very proud of that, of the history of cricket, and we're very proud that we have, from when it was first played and mentioned to these days where we are now playing, cricket on a more global scale, more organised scale, with different leagues, men's, women's, junior leagues, and getting better and better at it, and more organised and more developed.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, and thank you for sharing that brief history lesson on the history of cricket in Croatia and how it became to be. Really, I think all countries can share similar stories to that, especially in the associate world, and in terms of most of those European countries. Obviously, when the English came, brought cricket with them, and it's the case with many of the full member nations within cricket as well. And you can trace it back to those early years. So definitely all countries have a common connection with the game of cricket in some shape or form. So definitely a lot of people listening to this episode today will definitely take out something that they haven't discovered or learned before about cricket in Croatia in terms of its history and how it was introduced and how it all really began and started, really. So thank you, Mate, for sharing that with us in terms of the history of cricket in Croatia. Definitely a lot of people will definitely take a lot out of what you said in this episode, and definitely do their own research and want to learn more, which is what we want people to do in terms of discovering these associate countries and nations, and wanting to learn more and how they go about their business when it comes to the game of cricket. So, Mate, let's talk about the Croatia national cricket teams in terms of the women's and men's teams, because it'd be good to gain your insights of the two teams and learn more about their achievements, the player stories, because many of the players come from diverse backgrounds. And obviously for the women's team this year, it'll be a very special year for them, because they're about to embark on their women's T20 international journey for the first time. They haven't played a women's T20 international up until this year, and that will be in June in Prague, which is in the Czech Republic. And no doubt the women's team are looking forward to that opportunity to play on the world stage, whereas the men have done it for a couple of years now in terms of T20 nationals for them. So, Mate, for those who may not know a lot about the Croatia women's and men's teams, can you tell us more about them, the players, and some of their stories?
Yeah, well, the Croatian men's national team, as I mentioned, has been around for more than 20 years. First of all, in the old format of the one-day 50-over internationals, but now in a more contemporary format in the T20. Our first T20 matches that we had was back in 2022 at the ICC Europe Sub-Regional Qualifiers. That was played in Finland. That was pretty much our first matches in the T20 formats. As every kind of young team, gathering together, it took a lot of time for the players to get together, just to build a culture, to have winning games, just to meet each other, and so on, so on. So pretty much half our team was consisted of local Croatians living in Croatia, and the other half was consisted of our expats who come to Croatia every year during summer. And when I say expats, I mean from Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. A lot of good quality players, and there are many stories there. Like, for example, one of the players who kind of came to the whole tournaments. We kind of invited him in the last couple of months to play. He never knew that, there is cricket in Croatia. When he found out straight away there's cricket in Croatia, he dropped, everything, told his employer that, he needs to go to Croatia to play cricket, told his wife and kids he needs to go to Croatia and play cricket, almost got a divorce and so on, just to play, for the national team. Other stories also from the local Croatians who have never, played anything internationally. And for them to kind of, have the chance to play for the national team, just to be a part of the team, just to, absorb the culture, to see how the game is played, to see that atmosphere, to see how other nations play also. That was very rewarding for them, definitely. In regards to the women's team, our first matches we played was last year, actually, in September, October. The first games were played in a T10 format. It was a part of the European Cricket Internationals, where our women's national team played against the Czech team, women's team. That was their first actual games in the T10 formats. And then, as you mentioned now, the first ever T20 international games will be hopefully held in Prague in June. So that's something which we are very proud of, and where the women's team are actually training twice a week, and they've been training ever since October last year. So we've got a really good infrastructure there, a good management team for the women's team, and I must say we are very proud of that. So that's something which, looking at about 2 or 3 years ago, we never thought that we would have a women's team, a national team. But from last year and to the first, players that joined in, that's something which we can say that we're very happy and very proud of. And to see from one player to joining to now 20 and 30 and 40 women's female players playing, that's something which really makes us happy, because not only through the national team, we have our own women's league, and that's something which we never thought we would have 5 or 6 years ago. And as I said, on a daily basis, we work very hard, and from having one female player to now more than 50 or 60 and 70 and increasing, that's something which we it's a massive achievement for us, especially in a country like Croatia where it's not a traditional sport. But to have a women's national team and competing hopefully soon on an ICC scale also in the qualifiers. But first of all, with these T20 internationals against neighbouring countries, it will be a massive achievement for us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to see them get the opportunity to showcase their skills and hopefully get better and develop as the more series, the more tournaments they play, the more better they will be and be confident as well in their own skills and abilities, and hopefully do Croatia proud, which is the main thing, really, as well as the men's team as well. So that's really good to hear that. In terms of the rankings, because as many people would know, associate cricket, it depends whether or not you get more funding or not, depends where you finish in the rankings, where you're placed. So currently, as it stands, if you do have that information for us, in terms of the men's team, where are they ranked currently in the?
Well, unfortunately, back in 2022, when we finished the ICC Euro qualifiers, we were ranked 81 or 82, and I think that ranking is still the same, even though we had 2 wins against Serbia and Greece. Look, we as a developing associate country don't look at those rankings a lot. I know they are a criteria for, future events and so on. That's just probably simple to the fact that, we need to play more games. We need to play more T20 internationals to get more ranking points. And that's up to us as the federations. And this year, apart from the ICC Euro qualifiers in Germany, our federation is organising a lot more T20 internationals versus neighbouring countries in the T20 formats and also in the T10 format. I see it as there is not a as I can say or predict, a big, massive difference in between associate countries that are ranked 30 or 35 or 40 or 80. I see cricket, and as you know also, Jack, on the day, anything's possible. So, like, for example, we have a group for the ICC qualifiers, and in the group are Jersey, Belgium, Switzerland, and Serbia. So from Jersey and Belgium, they're teams that are ranked, in their mid-20s, to Belgium, that's ranked, I think, 34 or 5, to Switzerland's. Apart from Jersey, probably would be, a really hard game. I feel that as a associate country, we have every chance and a good chance of beating these other countries, and obviously giving Jersey a good game also. So I do feel that as a national team, when you look at the current status of the ICC rankings, somebody might feel, you don't have many wins there, you don't have many points. It's just one of those things where you kind of really need to disregard that in some ways and just come to the game on the day and do the best you can. Because as I feel, on any day of on a map or in a calendar, yeah, anything's possible. So against any team, you can have a bad day, you can have a good day. You can have several players, perform and so on. But that's what I feel when it comes to that. Obviously, as a federation, we're always looking towards increasing and improving our ranking, just through the ICC qualifiers, through other T20 internationals, and so on. So that's one of the main priorities for us is, as a federation, is to increase our men's senior ranking, and obviously to have our women's national team also on the ICC ranking list, and to also improve their ranking also as the years go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. That's definitely at the forefront for most associate nations when it comes to both their women's and men's teams in terms of where they're placed, and that sort of dictates whether or not they get more funding or not. So in the case of Croatia, as you pointed out, take it steady, slowly developed, in terms of that development for both teams, and forget about the rankings, and
exactly,
they're just numbers really. At the end of the day, they're just numbers. It doesn't really mean that doesn't mean anything really in terms of the greater aspect, greater things. When it comes to performance or that, they're just numbers, and we'll just play every series and every tournament and see what we can do in terms of getting better and develop, which is the important thing in terms of the development side of things, and making the teams running smoothly. In terms of the support staff, coaches, and that, good people behind the scenes for both women's and men's teams.
Yes, and I have to brag about this, and we have a fantastic team of people behind me, from coaches to umpires to volunteers to to previous part-time employees, to people who just love the game, promote the game in every way they can, to sponsors, to people that can help just through social media and so on. So our federation obviously has its own committee, and we have quite a bit of a diverse committee there, from our 5 or 6 cricketing centres in Croatia, and obviously our expat centres around the world. Apart from our committee, we also have our executive committee. That's like a more specialised committee where they kind of look in depth on how to develop the game and improve the game. Also, we have a lot of promoters of Croatian cricket. When I say promoters, I mean people which we all know about, who promote Croatian cricket whenever they can. So, like, for example, Brad Hogg from Australia, Darren Matty, the English international, even Simon Kadic is a proud Croatian background cricketer who played for Australia also. Our current head coach is Mao Loy. We all know the famous English cricketer. So just to people who are, who have been involved in the game for many, many years, and now are giving their time, the experience and the knowledge back to cricket, especially associate cricket, for us is a massive thing. Obviously, from the vice presidents to our admin personnel, just the people all around who just help with the groundwork, maintenance, getting our grounds prepared. Every cricketing centre that we have in Croatia, and we have quite a few of them, from Zagreb, Split, Dalmatia, Slavonia, we've got about 5 or 6 of them. Every centre has their own kind of representative to help promote and develop the game in every aspect they can. That kind of helps us as a federation, and obviously with the help and support that we get from our own Croatian Olympic Committee, government support, and so on. It does really help us a lot, and I must say we have a really great team there, and happily or not to say about that, but they're all pretty much volunteers, volunteering their time, even finance, in certain circumstances. As a federation, we would love to have a lot more funding, but it is what it is. We receive funding from the ICC. A lot of it, or the majority of it, goes towards women's cricket and junior crickets. That's something which we have high priority on. And just the rest of it, just to maintain this senior men's, domestic cricket season. Obviously just to kind of improve and develop our women's, cricket season, domestic national competitions, school cricket, develop that. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of will, a lot of enthusiasm. But I feel, with the people, behind me and around me, it's never hard. Whenever I speak to them, they always say to me, look, we've done this, we've done that. And I always thank them and appreciate them for the time and efforts, because that's what, we do. We're all hardworking people, have our own jobs, families, but, simply find the time to do these things on a daily and weekly basis. So I'm quite happy and proud that we do have that. And hopefully down the track, when, if ever Croatian Cricket Federation, receives more funding, which I hope we will, then we will have, a lot more than ways of rewarding these kind of people, in certain ways. But for the time being, from, opening up more clubs, forming more clubs, making more cricket grounds, that's something which we do on, on a yearly basis. And just with the support we get from certain cities, certain councils, in helping us, that's also. So it works from, in all ranges, from government support, administration support, personnel support, people on the ground, to grassroots cricket. Yeah, I'm really happy that it's going through that, and I would love it for it to continue in the years ahead.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. Definitely, you need good people behind you, good leadership, and people who are enthusiastic and working as a team. Really, that's the important thing, and definitely that's happening in Croatia, which is fantastic to hear, Mate. In terms of underage cricket, in terms of under 19s and that for both women's and men's, are there any plans to form teams, or do you have teams currently in those age groups in terms of development, playing in looking at clubs, etc.?
Yep. So looking at the current status now, our plan obviously, would be, apart from our men's national team and women's national team, is to form an under-19s junior team. So we have the bit of an issue there is trying to find, players who are 18, 19, and 17. That it's a bit hard to, a good quality cricketers. But we have a wide range of years there. So from the years of 12, 11 to about 16, 17, and 18. So we have a really good number of those juniors. It's just trying to fit them in to be more competitive, giving them more competitive matches, games. We are organising junior tournaments, so we feel that through organising these junior tournaments with other neighbouring countries who are in a similar situation, will kind of enable us to form a team, under 19 junior team, probably in the next 2 or 3 years. That'll be one of our goals. And after that, obviously, then to form an under 19 women's team also. So that's something which we have in our strategy for the next 5 years. But it does, have its obstacles. It does have its issues. Trying to find a lot of these juniors to play cricket at that later stage, that's one of the most difficult pathways we do have. But we hope, we're always positive, don't get me wrong, that things can come to that. And when my leadership team said that we can do it, I really trust that, and then I feel that we're on the right path. And look, give and take 2 or 3 years from now, Jack, I'll come back to you and say, yeah, we've just formed an under-19 junior in the Croatian national team in, boys and girls. So that's something which it's not, it's not, for example, undoable. It's very doable. It just takes a bit of time and just to oversee these obstacles and just get the support and just obviously expand the game of cricket to more and more juniors throughout these big cities in Croatia and communities.
Definitely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more there. It's very important to make sure that those youngsters coming through are getting that exposure, and hopefully can do great things in their cricket careers if they do go on and pursue greater things. So yeah, definitely it will take time, but good that it's in the pipe work, and it's certainly on the agenda, that's for sure. So as with many countries, they're looking to do that as well, get as many teams as they can playing under 19s or etc. Even international players as well, trying to get them that exposure and more games, really, series between countries in the associate world. That's the problem, really, is playing enough cricket, which is it's okay for the full members in international cricket at the moment because the schedule's jam-packed, but whereas with the associate world, not so much in terms of cricket, because it's pretty bare sometimes. Teams struggling.
Yes,
to play.
It definitely is. Yes, it definitely is. Yeah. I feel from grassroots cricket, giving them more opportunity to play, junior tournaments, junior competitions, and just attracting these young players to play. That's one of the major obstacles. At that young age of 18 or 19, but we feel that we have the right people for that, and just the right leadership team, and I feel that we will succeed in that also pathway.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of series and tournaments this year, what's in store for the men's team in terms of their series and tournaments, and what's on the horizon for them? We already know what the women are going to do this year, because they're going to play their first T20 matches in June in Prague in the Czech Republic. So we know what they're doing, but in terms of the men's, what's on the agenda for them this year?
Well, we have a busy schedule, which I'm very happy to say. When you're always busy, it's always good to hear that. So obviously, from an ICC point of view aspects, so from the 5th to the 15th of July, our senior men's national team will be competing at the ICC Europe Sub-Regional Qualifiers in Germany. In group, obviously, A with Jersey, Switzerland, Belgium, Serbia, and us. And in the other group, we have other European teams. So that's something which will happen from the 5th to the 15th of July. Apart from that, we have several T20I international tournaments happening in Hungary. And that's all part of the European Cricket Network organization in our T20 formats. After that, obviously, after August, in September and in October, our men's senior national team will be playing European Cricket Internationals in Spain. That's something which also is a part of the European Cricket Network organization. And obviously, we do have on schedule quite a bit of tournaments happening more regional based. So against the national teams of Slovenia, Serbia, Hungary, and so on. That's still in preparations. But our main focus for this year for the CMS national team would be the ICC qualifiers that are happening now soon in Germany in July, and the European Cricket Internationals and the T20I tournaments also after that. So and plus also we'll be having our own European Cricket Internationals in Croatia also. So it's a busy schedule. I know a lot of players are finding it hard to find free time from work. So, but obviously, most of these tournaments are played on the weekends. So that's something which makes it easier. But we do have a wider range of candidates for the national team. So that's why when you have tournaments like this happening very frequently, you've got to have a a really good base of about 40 to 50 players playing for the national team.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Obviously, many associate players, well, probably barring Brazil, who have made their women's team professional, they're not professional.
Yeah,
they do have
that's
other
right.
jobs and have to take time off and try and plan around these tournaments, etc. So, but they make it work at the end of the day. Players become resourceful, so they do make the effort to try and do the best they can in terms of getting around that. But as you said, it's important to have a good depth in the squad in terms of a bigger playing group, really, to cover all bases. So that's pretty promising to hear, Mate, in terms of games and series. Good to see that you're busy in terms of the men's team, and the women's team will have their series as well and go about their business, which is fantastic. And I think everyone would agree with me, Mate, when I say that we'll be wishing Croatia all the best in terms of the women's and the men's teams, and hopefully they can do great things, and we'll be watching closely, that's for sure. So everyone beware of Croatia. They're coming. They could shake up a few things in the associate world, maybe. But now I think everyone listening and watching this episode today will definitely feel like they'll take more of an interest and look to see where the teams are at in terms of their cricket and what they're doing, and see what the players do and what skill set they have, and just really hoping that they do well and develop. And I think that's the case for all associate nations, is that you want them to keep getting better and develop and just have fun. That's the important thing. That's why we play cricket, to have fun, enjoy it. And hopefully that's the case for the national teams and all the players, women's and men's, just enjoying it. So definitely, Mate, I'll be watching with close interest, as I tend to do. It's hard keeping up with things. But I'll definitely have an eye on both teams and see how they go. But definitely people listening as well will do the same, and hopefully they can achieve a lot of great things this year and also in the years to come. So hopefully that's the case. But thank you for sharing your insights on both the women's and men's teams. Really good to hear your insights and to hear some of the players' stories and backgrounds and what the women's and men's teams are doing and the people behind the scenes. So it's really encouraging. So we'll have to watch this space and see what happens in the years to come when it comes to the national teams in Croatia, both the women's and the men's. Mate, let's talk about the growth and development of cricket within Croatia in terms of getting cricket into local communities, clubs, schools, and grassroots, etc. And Mate, this is one of the challenges that many associate nations have, is how they introduce cricket and promote it. That's easier said than done in a country that's not familiar with the sport. So you must be scratching your head as the president and your team, back in your, sitting down at your desk, in your chair, scratching your head and saying, how do we do this? How do we introduce cricket into the community? How do we establish grassroots cricket in local communities and local cricket clubs? How do we establish underage tournaments, like in terms of competitions, pathways, systems, talent identification, to pick out who will be suitable to play international cricket for Croatia in the near future? Having facilities, that's often a difficult thing in associate cricket. You don't have access to nets, grounds, for people access in their local areas. I think that's something we take for granted in, let's just say, Australia, for example, because you can walk down and local park and there's your cricket ground and nets and facilities. And also making cricket accessible to people as well. How can they access cricket and make it easy for them to access the sport, and also getting cricket into schools in their sporting programs. That's often the case in many associate nations. To the people I've spoken to in this series, they've said that's the important thing we need to target, is getting cricket into schools and getting young kids involved in the sport at a young age. That's very important. So, Mate, what challenges does the Croatian Cricket Federation have in trying to grow and develop cricket in the Croatian community? And do you see cricket becoming a mainstream sport in Croatia? Your thoughts on that?
Well, funny you would say that all of us involved with the Croatian Cricket Federation, we always scratch our heads on a daily basis on how to get cricket involved in schools and in the communities. Look, I feel everyone has ideas, and we listen to everyone's ideas on how certain communities, certain cricketing centres can improve and develop cricket in their own community. So on that kind of basis, and one of our structure was to divide Croatian cricket into certain cricketing centres. It kind of helps us as a federation to give all these cricketing centres their own autonomy, their own independent structure, their own independent funding, and just their own independent pathway on how to develop and grow cricket in their own cricketing centres. I feel that's a positive thing that we've done. That way, we've seen a lot of improvements through these cricketing centres. When I say improvement, I mean cricket being involved and introduced in certain primary schools and certain high schools in these cricketing centres. So if you just hear, for example, every week or every 2 weeks, we introduce cricket into new communities, new schools. So a school by school, one by one, from the number one, we've got approximately about 25 to 30 schools and communities involved. So that's something which we implemented, and we gave every cricketing centre their own, pathway on how to work. Through that, obviously, the ICC have helped us a lot through equipment. So we received a lot of equipment from Create Cricket. So that's something which we give a lot to our cricketing centres, and then they then pass on to the cricketing primary schools, high schools, and the communities also. So, if we get on a daily basis one player playing cricket, then another player the next day playing cricket, and so on, so on, so on, that for us is a major thing. So on that, as a country, when you see different cricketing centres, we're probably the distance is about 200 to 300 kilometres from each cricketing centre. Then we kind of find it tough because of the distance. But we do have our cricket development officers who visit these cricketing centres on a frequent basis, and they take their time as volunteers, and they visit these cricketing centres frequently to help out as much as they can. Yes, in regards to the obstacles to bring cricket into the mainstream, we've had several talks and several meetings with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Sports, how we can kind of implement cricket as a mainstream sport, through just cricketing presentations, having cricket lessons as part of their physical education classes, just having the kids play once a week cricket or something like that. That's hard. We do have obstacles there, because then that kind of involves a lot more organisation, a lot more logistical preparations, planning, approvals, and so on, so on. So that's something which we will look forward to, and with the help of the Croatian Olympic Committee and administrations and certain city councils. But for the time being, currently, as we're right now, we're just kind of working with what we've got. That's our strategy now. Just through promotion, through advertising, through social media, through newspaper articles, through TV stations, TV channels, interviews, podcasts. We've had an interview with our vice presidents in a certain town that's about 100 kilometres from Zagreb, where we can, bring cricket into a certain town. So that's something which we kind of feel it's doing, positive things. But obviously, as like in every country, we can't do, everything. We just take it day by day. But when I first started off in 2021, I've seen major steps being done towards this, and a lot more kids playing, a lot more attention, and a lot more promotion. So, and a lot more awareness of cricket in Croatia. So hopefully one day we'll give it, I don't know, hopefully maybe 5 to 10 years, we're going to maybe hopefully see cricket as, the second or third most popular sport in Croatia. But for now, I'll probably put it down as a sport in growth, a sport in development, a sport that's developing gradually. But significantly in Croatia. So something, especially with these international schools that exist in Croatia, I see a lot more awareness there. So we do have a lot of international schools with a lot of international students. So I do see a kind of promotion, our space in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's just in terms of growth and development, it's just take it steady and,
Yep.
let's just not rush into things, which is the case for many associate countries adopting that approach. And that should be the right approach, not make massive changes, just stick with what you have, as you said, and see if that works. And then if we need to change something, then we'll make a change and we'll go from there. But I think, as you said, it's exposure. And I think cricket in the Olympics now will definitely help. That's been a big game changer in the associate world. A lot of people I've interviewed in this series have said the same thing. And you've mentioned that as well, Mate. And that must have been a very big game changer for you in terms of, funding and support from the Olympic delegation in Croatia.
Yeah, no, definitely. As I mentioned, we can only develop cricket and expand it as much as we can, but with funding, it will be a lot easier. We all know that through cricket equipment, through presentations, through just tournaments, travel. So becoming obviously a full status member of our Olympic Committee, we are entitled to funding. And that's something which we will receive, hopefully, in a significant amount next year as an Olympic sport. The Olympic Committee obviously has so many sports federations, and cricket for them was always probably in a fourth or fifth row when it comes to funding, unfortunately. But now, being an Olympic sports, we've managed to kind of bring attention that cricket now is not a sport in the fourth or fifth row, it should be a sport in the first row and second row. The results that we can possibly achieve at the Olympic Games in the future are very possible. And it's something that which we thank the ICC for, putting and for, submitting the application for cricket to be an Olympic sport, because that has not only enabled every associate member to be seen and to be vocal, but then it just enables their own Olympic committees to give them more funding, which they deserve. So that's something which every sport federation, they always compete against other sport federations. But obviously, as cricket being the second most popular sport, I feel that we should have been there years ago. And it's kind of about time that we receive the recognition that we deserve. I mean, not only European-wide, but I mean worldwide also.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a interesting tournament in 2028 in terms of how that will go in terms of cricket in the Olympics and how that will go. But it's definitely a positive thing for cricket and certainly for the associate nations, definitely, to get that exposure across and people can see it on TV and say, I didn't know we played cricket in our country, so I might as well do some investigating. So it can only benefit everyone, that's for sure. I asked this question, Mate, to everyone I've interviewed on this associate cricket series in terms of the relationship with the ICC. Now, many people would say the ICC are not quite doing their job when it comes to certain aspects in cricket. A lot of people have said they've dropped the ball on a few things. But many people I've spoken to have said we've had a good relationship with the ICC in terms of the regional bodies of the ICC, in terms of Europe, America, etc. So how would you describe your relationship with the ICC in terms of them helping Croatia out, for example?
Yes, as I mentioned before, the new leadership team of the ICC Europe team, they've been absolutely welcoming, supportive, helping us to achieve our criteria, to fulfill our criteria. We've, since day one, when we had our issues back in 2018-19, to fulfill our criteria, they've always been awarding. They've always been very welcoming, very patient with us. So I feel, through those kind of steps and characteristics, I feel that we have a really good relationship with the ICC, Europe especially, and that's something which we can see on a daily basis whenever we have issues or any kind of domestic issues or any other kind of similar problems. They're always there, so we can always ask them for any kind of advice, for any kind of extra funding that we need, for certain programs, development programs, junior programs, whatever. And it's not only our federation; it's pretty much every federation in Europe. I can't talk about other federations, for other continents, but when it comes to the funding, also the funding, as we say, every nation, every cricket federation, always when you talk to them, we need, obviously more funding would be, a lot better. But obviously, it is what it is. It's like when you work at a certain job, you have your salary, and you just kind of have to budget how much you receive and what your priorities are. So, and as every federation associate member in Europe, we all know the criterias. We all know the ways to receive more funding, and so on, so on. So it's a working base for us. But not saying that, in the past, and as I can say, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, that support wasn't like what it is right now. Obviously, just in regards to the national teams and so on, so on, I feel that in the past 4 to 5 years they've done a great job. The ICC Europe, involving so many associate countries, that's what you need for European crickets. Before that, it was different. Honestly, as small associate countries, we weren't receiving that support, on a European scale. But that's just the case with every kind of world federation or world association. In soccer, basketball, it can happen in every sport. So that's something which we see it, and I'm glad that they have developed from that and grown and learned from their ways on how to improve European cricket. And obviously, they have seen it. It's a massive market in Europe. A lot of people love crickets, and we're really glad that with ICC Europe and other organisations like the European Cricket Network and stuff like that, organisations like that, and they've really put associate cricket in Europe, on a world scale. So look, and I'm really happy about that, and I've seen a lot of developments, not only in Croatia but in every associate member. I've seen a lot of developments of crickets through the help of ICC Europe lately. Definitely in the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's good to hear that they are helpful and encouraging and supportive, which is great. Which is great to hear. All those things are happening at the moment in terms of the ICC, in terms of ICC Europe helping out European countries and associate nations. That's fantastic to hear that they're offering that support. In terms of things that you would like to see improved, from your perspective, what are the things that you would like to see done better in terms of support and help and guidance from the ICC in general?
Look, obviously, with every federation and every nation associate member, women's cricket and junior cricket, that will be probably one of the areas where we can kind of get more improvement. But yet again, that still comes down to each federation. Probably, having facilities also. We all know that in cricketing countries, it's a lot easier to get those proper cricketing facilities. Whereas in the associate members, it's harder to get. Probably, obviously improvement of funding, probably, through just to obtain more cricket facilities like indoor centres, training nets, more cricketing grounds, something which I feel that every associate member, can put the hand up and say, yeah, we probably need a lot more help there. Look, it's just probably more exposure for it to become a mainstream sport, just probably more partnership with governing bodies in each federation. So, but as I said, that comes mostly down to each federation. Obviously, the funding as it is, it's increased from last year to this year for the associate members. Obviously, every associate members have their own different scales. So as we're on the I think on a lower scale, so it just gives us that opportunity and that pathway to get more and more funding through, just fulfilling different criterias, fulfilling more criterias, and that way then we can receive more funding. And so obviously have a women's league, a proper T20 women's league, which unfortunately we have our own women's league, but we don't have that T20 women's league yet. With hardball cricket, outdoor 8-a-side, same with junior cricket. So that's something which, when we fulfill, and hopefully we'll fulfill that in the years to come, then we will receive more funding there. But as I said, I probably just more onto the grounds, just the facilities. When you get more facilities, then you'll get more kids, playing cricket, training. That's something which I feel every member has obstacles and difficulties with, definitely. And just the maintenance of the grounds. We all know that it's not cheap. It is expensive, buying cricket pitches and fields and just maintaining that throughout the year. That will probably be the one of the major ones. Yeah. And obviously,
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So that's something that the ICC can do a little bit better in terms of support. But obviously, it'll take a bit of time, I suppose, when it comes to those things. In terms of volunteers, volunteering at grassroots level, like people becoming umpires and scorers and coaches in their local communities. Just tell us about the volunteer side of things. Are a lot of people putting their hand up and saying, "Yeah, I want to help out"?
Yes. So last year we had our level 1 ICC Europe coach cohort course that was held in Zagreb. That's in regards to level 1 coaches. And then this year we've had the ICC Europe umpire level 1 cohort course. So obviously that's something which we're proud to have hosted. And throughout these courses, you get a lot of ideas. A lot of people putting their hands up and saying, "Look, I want to be a coach, level 1 coach. I want to be an umpire." And you get more and more people. So unfortunately, the spots were limited. But now this year in September and October, we will then organise our own national umpire level 1 course, where then we will hopefully to get 15 candidates, and they will be all accredited, level 1 umpires. So in regards to when we first started naming people who can be coaches and umpires, that number has considerably increased to 300% or 400%. So every year we're getting more coaches, we're getting more umpires, and most of them are all volunteers. Trying to coach their own community where they live, trying to become proper coaches, and that's what we need. We need certified coaches, within the safeguarding guidelines, respecting all the policies and regulations, and just making the kids that want to come and play cricket, making in safe environments, and then just obviously trying to be as much knowledgeable and professional in their aspect. So as I said, from day one when we first started, we've had a massive increase of numbers of umpires and coaches, which we're very happy about, and we're getting even more and more. And the fact that's making us even more happier is we're getting more women coaches and more women umpires also. So that's what's making our work even more happier and even more awardable. We're just receiving a lot more information and a lot more feedback, and we've got now pretty much 7 or 8 female umpire candidates and coach candidates also for this year. And then it'll just expand from then on, day by day. That's what we hope. Yeah.
Definitely, that's really encouraging to hear. Really great to hear.
And plus sports teachers from schools, from primary schools, high schools, we've got a lot of them on board also through the ICC Ed apps. There's a lot of there are apps which they can do online just to give them that foundation knowledge and so on. So that's something which the ICC have helped out a lot in regards to that, just giving people who want to be involved and know that foundation knowledge, and then after that, then they can work from level 1, level 2, and level 3, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. Also, the language barrier when it comes to learning the laws. translating that from English to Croatian is probably not as
Yes.
easy as people would think.
Yeah.
So how do you go about trying to navigate that challenge?
Look, I feel Croatia as it is, we are a nation that speaks a lot of foreign languages. And when I say foreign, English would be the number one foreign language. And through our primary school and high school, a lot of our kids learn the English language very well. So I feel that kind of barrier doesn't exist as much like in other countries. Obviously, with that program that they have, we can kind of modify in Croatian in the years to come, and that's what we're maybe hoping to do in the years to come. But for the time being, a lot of our trainers, coaches, umpires are learning what's the term not out, LBW, what the term is, full toss, run out. So they're learning all those terminologies which they would not have learned anywhere else. And I feel that they are bit by bit they're learning all those rules and on how many ways you can get out, on how you can coach kids and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel that a lot of our coaches and umpires are learning that very well. And for now, it's not as much of a barrier, because I think with every kind of English terminology we have a translation for that in Croatian also. So it's something which we kind of do help them out with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's often the challenge for some other associate nations is translating from English to their own language. It can often be difficult.
Yeah,
so
it can be hard.
Yes, well, I did mention that when I spoke to David Robson and Ragnar Halleck from Estonia, Mate, I mentioned that in our chat about maybe the MCC should translate the laws of cricket into different nationalities,
yes,
languages.
Look,
that would be a good idea.
Yeah, look, I think it will be a great idea, and probably it's on the agenda. Who knows? While we're speaking, but but as I mentioned before, these apps, ed apps and stuff like that. A lot of it has been translated into a lot of different languages. So I feel the more universal you make it, and the more diverse you make it and inclusive, everybody will have their an opportunity to learn about the laws of cricket. And once you learn the laws of cricket, then you'll be stuck forever, definitely. Just on how to improve.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's 42 of them, so
exactly. Yeah.
Lots of reading to do and defeat points.
Yeah.
Yes, I should know because I am an umpire myself. So
yes.
It's definitely worth it. The day. Whereas with people just learning the game, it can be overwhelming, especially for people just coming into. So yeah, but as I said, it's definitely worth it. So brilliant to hear that a lot of people are volunteering to become scorers and umpires and
scorers, especially curators, scorers, everything. So just learn the whole thing about cricket from the stumps to the pitch to the grounds, to anything that can involve them with cricket. They're really happy to see that.
Definitely, and also very encouraging to hear about the growth and development as well, Mate. And that's really going well. So that's fantastic. Let's hope that continues to go up and up as the years progress, and some good work there behind the scenes, which is fantastic. So thank you for sharing.
No, thank you very much for that. That's our priority from day-to-day basis on how to improve cricket in general.
Yes, day by day, or take it one ball at a time. We say
exactly. That's all we go, step by step. Yeah.
So one of those cricketing cliches. Yeah, take it one ball at a time and see what happens.
Exactly. Yep. We have wonderful ideas, but we just need to put them all in place. Definitely. So.
Yeah, definitely. But very encouraging, very positive from what you said, Mate. So definitely, you should be proud of yourself and the team's efforts in terms of implementing these programs in the growth and development of the game in Croatia. So definitely a lot to be optimistic about. Well, Mate, we've finally reached the end of our long discussion. I've enjoyed it immensely, but we've only got one more topic to go, Mate, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
And I thought to finish our chat today, let's talk about what the future holds for cricket in Croatia. Now, it's very hard to predict the future, as we know. It's very uncertain. But if you had to cast your eye into the crystal ball and predict certain things that may happen into the future. So we would like to get your thoughts on that. So, Mate, how do you see Croatia cricket and associate cricket going into the future? Your thoughts on that to end today?
Yeah. Well, specifically associate cricket in Croatia and our federation, I would like, and that's one of our goals, is to have live streaming matches on the Croatian TV. That's something which every sport now, pretty much mainstream sports have in Croatia. That's one of our goals, to put cricket on the TV channels and stations, radio stations, definitely. In many more schools around Croatia, especially in our cricketing centres, making national presentations of cricket so they can be all implemented and introduced in a lot of schools around Croatia, making cricket possibly and hopefully a mandatory sport that a lot of primary schools and high school students will need to do, something which we were trying to do that also on a national basis. Obviously, a developed and growing senior domestic competition, women's competition and junior competition, especially women's and juniors, increasing our rankings in the senior men's national team, putting our women's national team on the ICC ranking list also, and to increase that. And as I said before, to form the under-19s junior boys and girls teams to compete in future competitions. Obviously, the numbers of cricketers playing in Croatia, we would love for that to increase at least for another 100% or 200%. Having kids, when I come outside in Croatia, having kids playing cricket on the streets, that's just one of the examples, playing on the beaches and so on, so on. Obviously, the attention that we can receive from government agencies, ministries, TV stations, radio stations, to put that on a bigger scale. That's something which we also have goals at. And in general, at the end, getting more cricket facilities, training facilities, cricket grounds, and so on, so on. So that's something which a lot is on the agenda and in plan, but that's something which we do see our goals probably in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for sharing that. Your predictions into the crystal ball.
Yeah, that's what I kind of predict.
Yeah. So hopefully those predictions do come in some sort of reality or some shape or form in the years to come. But it was good to get your thoughts on the future, and the future looks bright and optimistic in Croatia when it comes to cricket. And after what we've discussed today, it looks pretty promising and optimistic and encouraging, which is fantastic. So thank you for sharing your predictions when it comes to the future of the game in Croatia, Mate. Mate, thank you for joining me today for this Associate Cricket Series episode to discuss all things Croatia cricket. I've enjoyed it immensely. I've learned so much, and I'm sure everyone listening and watching have learned so much as well about Croatia cricket. So Mate, if people want to get in touch with you or Croatia cricket, where can they do that if they want to make some inquiries?
Well, we're most they can get in contact with myself, obviously, but we're very vocal on our Facebook. So Croatia Cricket, just type in Croatia Cricket on Facebook. Instagram also, Croatia_cricket, or on our website, www.cricket-croatia.com. Or just, go to search Croatia Cricket. That'll be probably the most easiest way, through Wikipedia. Or obviously, if they want to email me privately, just mate.jukic. I'll forward you the emails, .jukic@cricket-croatia.com. But probably the easiest way would be just on Facebook, through Instagram, Croatia Cricket, or just on Wikipedia or on Google search. And then on they'll see a lot of information there, and then that way they can get through to us also, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll leave links to those in the description of this episode for people to check out. And
I'll send them through, definitely.
We'll definitely leave links in the description of this episode for people to check out and, do some research, or, if some connections with Croatia in terms of family or want to play cricket, then they can go ahead and do that. So we'll definitely leave links for people to check out in the description of this episode to make some inquiries. Before we go, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Most of the podcast is available on Anchor, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you, Mate, for joining me today to discuss all things Croatia cricket. I hope all of you watching or listening to this Associate Cricket Series episode learned a lot about cricket in Croatia from Mate. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.